The Grantham and Kesteven Hospital in Lincolnshire was a respected medical facility in the local community. But in 1991, very strange things started happening in Children's Ward 4, as several cold blues happened over a 2-month period. 4 children had died during this time, and the hospital staff were flustered as to what the cause was. But nobody would have guessed that one of the nurses might have been responsible. Welcome to History's Biggest Villains. Beverley Allitt was born on October 4, 1968, and grew up in the village of Corby Glen near the town of Grantham as one of 4 children. Beverley displayed some odd tendencies early on. She would wear dressings and casts over wounds that she would use to draw attention to herself, without actually letting these injuries be examined. She became extremely attention-seeking as an adolescent, becoming aggressive towards others. Beverley showed signs of Munchausen syndrome as well, spending considerable time in hospitals seeking medical attention for a slew of physical ailments. She even got her perfectly healthy appendix removed. This was slow to heal as she kept messing with the surgical scar. She was also known to harm herself and have resorted to doctor hopping. As medical professionals became familiar with her attention-seeking behaviors, she would move to the next clinic. She went on to train as a nurse at Grantham College and was immediately suspected of odd behavior, which included smearing her feces on the walls of a nursing home where she trained. Her boyfriend at the time said that she was aggressive, manipulative, and deceptive, claiming false pregnancy as well as rape before the end of the relationship. Her attendance during her training was poor due to her many illnesses, and as a result, she failed her nursing exams multiple times. Despite this, she was hired on a temporary 6-month contract at the chronically understaffed Grantham and Kesteven Hospital in Lincolnshire in 1991, where she began work in Children's Ward 4. When she started, there were only 2 trained nurses on the day shift and 1 for nights. On February 21, 1991, 7-month-old Liam Taylor was admitted to Ward 4 with a chest infection. Beverley went out of her way to reassure his parents that he was in good hands and persuaded them to go home to get some rest. When they returned, Allitt said that Liam had endured a respiratory emergency, but he had recovered. She volunteered for extra night duty so she could watch over Liam, and his parents chose to spend the night at the hospital as well. Liam had another respiratory incident just before midnight, but it was felt that he had recovered. Allitt was left alone with the boy and his condition worsened, becoming deathly pale before red blotches appeared on his face, as Allitt then summoned an emergency resuscitation team. At the time, her nursing colleagues were confused by the absence of alarm monitors which had failed to sound when he stopped breathing. Liam suffered cardiac arrest, and despite the best efforts of the team, he suffered severe brain damage and remained alive only due to the life support machines. On medical advice, his parents made the heartbreaking decision to remove their baby from life support. His cause of death was recorded as heart failure. Allitt was never questioned about her role in Liam's death. Only 2 weeks after Liam's death, Timothy Hardwick, an 11-year-old with cerebral palsy, was admitted to Ward 4 following an epileptic fit on March 5, 1991. Allitt took over his care, and again, following a period where she was alone with him, she summoned the emergency resuscitation team, who found him without a pulse and turning blue. Despite their best efforts, Timothy was unable to be revived. An autopsy later failed to provide an obvious cause of death, so Timothy's epilepsy was officially blamed. 1-year-old Kaylee Desmond was admitted to Ward 4 on March 3, 1991 with a chest infection, from which she seemed to be recovering well. 5 days later, with Allitt in attendance, Kaylee went into cardiac arrest in the same bed where Liam Taylor had died. The resuscitation team were able to revive her, and she was transferred to another hospital in Nottingham. Attending physicians discovered an odd puncture hole under her armpit. They also discovered an air bubble near the puncture mark, which they attributed to an accidental injection, but no investigation was initiated. What? 5-month-old Paul Crampton was placed in Ward 4 on March 20th, 1991 as a result of a non-serious lung infection. Just prior to his discharge, Beverley, who was again with the patient on her own, summoned help as Paul appeared to be suffering from insulin shock, going into a near coma 3 separate times. Each time, the doctors revived him, but were unable to explain the spike in his insulin levels. Allitt rode with him in an ambulance on the way to another hospital, and he was again found to have too much insulin. Paul fortunately survived. The next day, 5-year-old Bradley Gibson, who had pneumonia, went into unexpected cardiac arrest but was saved by the resuscitation team. Subsequent blood tests showed that his insulin was high, which made no sense to the physicians. A visit from Beverley later that night resulted in yet another heart attack, and Bradley was transported to Nottingham where he recovered. On March 22, 1991, 2-year-old Yik Hung Chan turned blue and appeared in considerable distress when Allitt raised the alarm, but he responded well to oxygen. Another attack resulted in his transfer to the larger hospital in Nottingham, where he recovered. His symptoms were attributed to a fractured skull, the result of a fall. 2-month-old twins Katie and Becky Phillips were kept for observation as a result of their premature delivery. A bout of gastroenteritis brought Becky into Ward 4 on April 1, 1991, where Allitt took over her care. 2 days later, she raised the alarm, claiming that Becky appeared hypoglycemic and cold to the touch, but no ailment was found. Becky was sent home with her mother. During the night, Becky went into convulsions and cried out in pain, but the doctor who was summoned suggested that she had colic. Her parents kept her in her bed for observation, but she died during the night. Despite an autopsy, pathologists could not find any clear cause of death. Becky's surviving twin Katie was admitted to Grantham as a precaution. Unfortunately, Allitt was again in her care. It wasn't long before she was again summoning a resuscitation team to revive Katie, who had stopped breathing. Efforts to revive Katie were successful, but 2 days later she suffered a similar attack, which resulted in the collapse of her lungs. Following another revival attempt, Katie was transferred to Nottingham, where it was found that 5 of her ribs were broken, in addition to having serious brain damage as a result of oxygen deprivation. Katie's mother, Sue Phillips, was so grateful to Allitt for saving her baby's life that she asked her to be her godmother. Allitt accepted, despite having inflicted partial paralysis, cerebral palsy, and sight and hearing damage on the infant. 4 more victims followed, but the high occurrence of unexplained attacks in otherwise healthy patients, along with Allitt's attendance during all of these attacks, finally caused suspicions to be raised at the hospital. On April 22, 1991, 15-month-old Claire Peck was admitted, as she was an asthmatic who required a breathing tube. While in Allitt's care for only a few minutes, the infant suffered a heart attack, but the resuscitation team revived her successfully. After she was again alone in Allitt's presence, Claire suffered a second attack from which she could not be revived. Although an autopsy indicated that Claire had died from natural causes, Dr. Nelson Porter, a consultant at the hospital, initiated an inquiry. The high number of cardiac arrests over the previous 2 months on Ward 4 alarmed him. An airborne virus was initially suspected, but nothing was found. A test that revealed a high level of potassium in Claire's blood resulted in the police being summoned 18 days later. Her exhumation resulted in the discovery of traces of lignocaine in her system, a drug used during cardiac arrest, but never given to a baby. Stuart Clifton, the police superintendent, suspected foul play. No. He examined the other suspicious cases that had occurred in the previous 2 months, finding unusually high doses of insulin in most. Further evidence revealed that Allitt had reported the key missing to the insulin refrigerator. All records were checked, parents of the victims were interviewed, and a security camera was installed in Ward 4. When record checks revealed missing daily nursing logs, which corresponded to the time when Paul Crampton had been in Ward 4, suspicions were raised. When 25 suspicious incidents with 13 victims were identified, 4 of whom were dead, the only common denominator in this was that Beverley Allitt was present at every episode. It took you 25 incidents to think that somebody was doing something to these kids? Like, that's crazy. By July 26, 1991, police felt that they had sufficient evidence to charge Allitt with murder, but it wasn't until November that she was officially charged. She remained calm under interrogation, denying any part in the attacks, insisting that she had merely been caring for the victims. A search of her home revealed parts of the missing nursing log. Further extensive background checks by the police indicated a pattern of behavior that pointed to a very serious personality disorder. Allitt exhibited symptoms of both Munchausen syndrome and Munchausen syndrome by proxy, which are characterized by gaining attention through illness. Despite visits and assessments by a number of healthcare professionals while in prison, Allitt refused to confess what she had done. After a series of hearings, Allitt was charged with 4 counts of murder, 11 counts of attempted murder, and 11 counts of causing grievous bodily harm. As she awaited her trial, she rapidly lost weight and developed anorexia. After numerous delays to her illnesses, she went to trial at Nottingham Crown Court on February 15, 1993, where prosecutors demonstrated to the jury how she had been present at each suspicious episode and the lack of episodes when she was taken off the ward. Evidence about high readings of insulin and potassium in each of the victims, as well as drug injection and puncture marks, were also linked to Beverley. She was further accused of cutting off her victims' oxygen, either by smothering or by tampering with machines. Her unusual behavior in childhood was brought to light, and the pediatrics expert Professor Roy Meadow explained Munchausen syndrome and Munchausen by proxy syndrome to the jury, pointing out how Allitt demonstrated symptoms of both, as well as introducing evidence of her typical post-arrest behavior and high incidence of illness, which delayed the start of her trial. It was his opinion that Beverley Allitt would never be cured, making her a clear danger to anyone with whom she might have come in contact. After a trial that lasted nearly 2 months, at which Beverley attended only 16 days due to her illnesses, she was convicted on May 23, 1993, and given 13 life sentences for murder and attempted murder. The impact on the Grantham and Kesteven Hospital was so severe that the maternity unit was closed down altogether. Rather than going to prison, Allitt was incarcerated at Rampton Secure Hospital in Nottingham, a high-security facility mainly housing individuals detained under the Mental Health Act. As an inmate, she began her attention-seeking behavior again, ingesting ground glass and pouring boiling water on her hand. Allitt subsequently admitted to 3 of the murders for which she was charged, as well as 6 of the assaults. The appalling nature of her crimes placed her on the Home Office list of criminals who will never be eligible for parole. On December 6, 2007, Mr. Justice Stanley Burton, sitting in the High Court of Justice, ordered Allitt to serve the minimum sentence of 30 years. Her minimum tariff expired in November 2021, and she is now eligible for release on parole. On October 3rd, 2023, it was reported that Allitt was appearing before a mental health tribunal to be assessed for a potential transfer to a mainstream prison. If the transfer takes place, Allitt could be eligible for parole after 6 months. So you're telling me someone who killed 4 children and tried to kill 9 more is eligible to be released? The British system sucks, because it seems like you have to do so much to get a life sentence. Like, you're a nurse deliberately killing children and then befriending the parents of the children that you're killing. But somehow, she's eligible for parole. What do you have to do to get a life sentence in Britain? What do you have to do to get a life sentence at this point? Because it seems like you can murder multiple people, you can murder babies, you can kill 5 or 6 people, you can do all this stuff. They'll let you out after about 20 years on parole. And then you go out and you do it again, and then they're gonna give you parole again. Like, that makes no sense. Like, how are you sentenced to 13 life sentences, but yet you might get on parole after 30 years? That doesn't make sense. Like, what was the point of that sentencing if you're not going to uphold the sentence? How did the victims feel? Like, the families of the victims who brought their babies into the hospital and someone intentionally killed their babies. Man, if she gets out, somebody needs to leak her address. That's all I'm going to say, because I'm not making them type of threats on the internet. But somebody needs to, handle your business. That's all I'm going to say. Leave a like if you enjoyed this. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Don't forget to turn on my post notifications if you haven't already. I appreciate all the support you guys give this channel. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Stay on the grind. I'm out. Peace.